Okay, and joining us now via Skype for more on this week's Democratic National Convention is Spencer Critchley, former campaign advisor to Barack Obama and the author of Patriots of Two Nations, Why Trump Was Inevitable and What Happens Next. Spencer, good morning to you. Great to have you with us.
Good morning. Thank you. Good to be here.
So right off the top here, you make this notion in your book that Trump's presidency was inevitable because it really traces back to just history. History led us to this point. So talk to us about that statement.
Yeah, a lot of people think that President Trump created this extreme division that we're suffering from now, but I would say he's really more an expression of something that goes back to the founding of the country. The United States was the first country ever created based on the principles of the Enlightenment. It was history's first civic nation. And what that means is you're an American not because of any particular ethnic group you belong to, but just because you're loyal to the Constitution. Most nations, of course, had always been ethnic nations based on some ethnic identity, like the Germans or the French or the Japanese or whatever. So America was very, very different that way. The thing is, not everybody accepted that vision of what kind of country this should be. Andrew Jackson didn't, for example. The South during the Civil War didn't. That war, of course, was fought over slavery, first of all, but it was also a war over two competing visions of what kind of nation this should be. The civic nation versus the ethnic nation is one way of looking at it. And I think that Donald Trump represents the latest upsurge of that conflict.
In your title of your book, it's why was Trump inevitable? But then you say, what happens next? Can you give us a sneak preview before we talk about the conventions? We want to know what's going to happen next.
Sure. And, I, like many people, was deeply humbled by 2016. I did not see his election coming, which is one reason why I wrote the book, is to try to understand what had just happened to us. I think, though, that said, that Biden and Harris are likely to win the upcoming election, but that is not going to heal our division. And that ultimately is going to be up to each one of us as citizens in a democracy. And we must remember democracy means rule by the people. Demos is the Greek word for people. And we need to start healing this division within our families and our neighborhoods and communities. And that starts with understanding these two very, very different worldviews that have existed since the founding that have never really understood each other to date. And that means not so much arguing and trying to win based on facts and logic, if you're sort of on my side of the fence, the kind of pro-enlightenment side of the fence, but understanding that we have to restore trust first. And that's going to be more about just seeing the world through another person's eyes, whether you agree with it or not, and understanding that even truth itself can be defined differently in these two different worldviews.
Well, I think that's what makes it so very different this time and so very divisive.
That's right. And so,
yeah.
That's right. And so moving into this convention, what do the Democrats need to do, especially with regard to those undecided voters? How do they make that appeal?
I think so far, especially since a couple of things happened, since the South Carolina primary and since Jen O'Malley Dillon became the campaign manager for the Biden campaign, I think they're doing the right things. I mentioned Jen O'Malley Dillon because I think she's so effective. She's an Obama campaigns veteran. And the campaign, I think, has become much more focused since she came on board. I think they're basically doing the right thing. First of all, Donald Trump is essentially a giant asteroid heading towards the Earth. And if Biden can just show himself to be a responsible leader who has knowledge and integrity, that's essentially all anybody's asking for, I think. More than that, I think it's important for them to avoid the common Democratic pitfall of campaigning too much in their heads. I think this is one reason among many that Hillary Clinton lost was she was very qualified, but she was overly sort of intellectualized and overly policy focused. Effective candidates have to be a mixture of substance and charisma. Trump is very powerful on the charisma side, at least for people who respond to his version of charisma, and he has essentially no substance, I would say. Biden has great substance and great charisma, which I think is why Trump fears him so much as an opponent and got himself impeached trying to block him. So I think if they essentially do what they're doing, stick with the substance, but lead with the charisma, speak in simple, emotional, inspiring terms. Don't worry too much about getting into the weeds about policy.
Go from the heart. You made this distinction that there's a civic-minded kind of nation that some people want, and an ethnic nation. But hasn't that train already left the station, Spencer? I mean, we are an ethnic nation. So when you look at, let's say, Kamala Harris, how does she represent the future of the party and potentially the future of that side of the country that wants more diversity embraced?
You know, I would say actually we're a multi-ethnic nation, and that's of the essence of what America is. And I would say Kamala Harris actually is all American. It's exciting that she's a woman, that she's African American, that she's Indian American, but she represents the fulfillment of that founding vision of America. Your ethnicity is just supposed to be interesting. It's not supposed to define who you are, what your rights are, what your level of participation is. That's what America is supposed to be about. That's what the vision behind this civic nation idea was. I think the mistake, if I may be so bold, that the founders made was they overlooked just how powerful ethnic identity is and how it will keep resurging. Ethnicity being a mixture of culture and race. But I think part of the struggle that we're going through now, the essence of the struggle really, and a large part of what Patriots of Two Nations is about is, are we a civic nation which welcomes all ethnicities because America essentially is all ethnicities, or are we going to go backwards to the more traditional ethnic identity-based nation, which I think it was just a gigantic forsaking of a very inspiring vision and a much better path to the future.
What's really interesting we're seeing is not just happening here in the United States. This is a situation being debated all over the world.
Spencer, we thank you very much for being with us this morning, for your words.
Thank you. Very interesting.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back, everybody. Stay with us.